Project 2025. Project 2025 is a collection of conservative and right-wing policy proposals from the Heritage Foundation to reshape the United States federal government and consolidate executive power should the Republican nominee win the 2024 presidential election. It proposes reclassifying tens of thousands of federal civil service workers as political appointees in order to replace them with loyalists more willing to enable the next Republican president's policies. It seeks to infuse the government and society with Christian values. Critics have characterized Project 2025 as an authoritarian, Christian nationalist plan to transform the US into an autocracy. Many legal experts have said it would undermine the rule of law, the separation of powers, the separation of church and state, and civil liberties, including the civil rights of women, persons of color, and the LGBTQ community. In July 2024, Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts said, "We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be." In April 2023, Project 2025 Director Paul Dons said that it is systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state. The project proposes deploying the military for domestic law enforcement. Project 2025 envisions widespread changes to the government, particularly economic and social policies and the role of the federal government and its agencies. The plan proposes taking partisan control of the Department of Justice, DOJ, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, the Department of Commerce, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, and the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, dismantling the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and sharply reducing environmental and climate change regulations to favor fossil fuel production. The blueprint seeks to institute tax cuts, though its writers disagree on the wisdom of protectionism. Project 2025 recommends abolishing the Department of Education, whose programs would be either transferred to other agencies or terminated. Funding for climate research would be cut while the National Institutes of Health, NIH, would be reformed according to conservative principles. The project seeks to cut funding for Medicare and Medicaid, and urges the government to explicitly reject abortion as health care. The project states that life begins at conception and seeks to eliminate coverage of emergency contraception under the Affordable Care Act and enforce the Comstock Act to prosecute those who send and receive contraceptives and abortion pills nationwide. The project seeks to infuse the government with elements of Christianity. It proposes criminalizing pornography, removing legal protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and terminating diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs and affirmative action by having the DOJ prosecute anti-white racism. The project recommends the arrest, detention, and deportation of undocumented immigrants living in the US by using the military to capture and place them in internment camps. The Insurrection Act of 1807 would be used to allow the military to engage in domestic policing and capturing undocumented immigrants. It promotes capital punishment and the speedy finality of those sentences. Some conservatives and Republicans have criticized the plan for its stance on climate change and foreign trade. Other critics believe Project 2025 is rhetorical window dressing for what would be 4 years of personal vengeance at any cost. The project's authors acknowledge that most of the proposals would require the Republican Party to control both the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Some aspects of the plan have recently been ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court and would face court challenges, while others are norm-breaking proposals that might survive court challenges. Although the project cannot, by law, promote a specific presidential candidate, many contributors have close ties to Donald Trump and his 2024 presidential campaign. The Washington Post called the project the most detailed articulation of what a second Trump term would look like. In April 2024, John McEntee said that the Trump campaign and Project 2025 planned to integrate a lot of our work by summer. While the Trump campaign initially said the project aligned well with its Agenda 47 proposals, the project has increasingly caused friction with the Trump campaign, which has generally avoided specific policy proposals that can be used to criticize him. The Trump campaign has attempted to distance itself from the effort, and in July 2024, Trump denied knowledge of the project and disavowed it, even though many of his advisors and former officials of his presidential administration drafted and endorsed it. Since 1981, the Heritage Foundation has been publishing new editions of its Mandate for Leadership series in schedules in parallel with presidential elections. Heritage calls its mandate a policy Bible. Heritage President Kevin Roberts sees the organization's current role as institutionalizing Trumpism. He established Project 2025 on the 21st of April, 2023, to provide the 2024 Republican presidential nominee with a personnel database and ideological framework, after civil servants refused to support Trump during his attempt to institute a Muslim travel ban, his effort to install a new attorney general to assist him in his attempts to overturn the 2020 election, and his call for the use of lethal force, saying when the looting starts, the shooting starts during the George Floyd protests. Better. Source needed. Associate Project Director Spencer Cretian argued that it was past time to lay the groundwork for a White House more friendly to the right. Donald Trump at a campaigning event in New Hampshire in January 2024. Many contributors of the project have close ties to Donald Trump and his 2024 presidential campaign. In April 2023, the Heritage Foundation published the 920-page mandate written by hundreds of conservatives, most prominently former Trump administration officials. Nearly half of the project's collaborating organizations have received dark money contributions from a network of fundraising groups linked to Leonard Leo, a major conservative donor and key figure in guiding the selection of Trump's federal judicial nominees. Axios reported that while Heritage had briefed other 2024 Republican presidential primaries candidates on the project, it is undeniably a Trump-driven operation, pointing to the involvement of Trump's most fervent internal loyalty enforcer Johnny McEntee as a senior advisor to the project. The 2024 Trump campaign said no outside group speaks for Trump and that its Agenda 47 is the only official plan for a second Trump presidency. Two top Trump campaign officials later issued a statement seeking to distance the campaign from what unspecified outside groups were planning, although many of those plans reflected Trump's own words. The New York Times reported the statement noticeably stopped short of disavowing the groups and seemed merely intended to discourage them from speaking to the press. Nevertheless, the campaign said it was appreciative of suggestions from like-minded organizations. Project 2025 is not the only conservative program with a database of prospective recruits for a potential Republican administration, though these initiatives' leaders all have connections to Trump. In general, these initiatives seek to help Trump avoid the mistakes of his first term, when he arrived at the White House unprepared. The two officials released a similar memo days later, after Axios reported Trump intended to staff a new administration with full, proud MAGA warriors, anti-GOP establishment zealots, and eager and willing to test the boundaries of executive power to get Trump's way, which would include targeting and jailing critics in government and media. Axios also reported on people being considered for senior positions in a second presidency, including Kash Patel, Steve Bannon, and Mike Davis, a former aide to Senator Chuck Grassley who has promised a 3-week reign of terror should Trump name him acting attorney general. Patel had said on Bannon's podcast 2 days earlier, "We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out." In June 2024, Bannon named specific current or former FBI and DOJ officials who would be hunted down for alleged crimes and treason, even if they fled the country. At the 2023 Iowa State Fair, Project 2025's leaders began recruiting people for future government posts in the event of a Republican victory. Policies. Philosophical outlook. The main Project 2025 document, Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise, outlines 4 main aims: restoring the family as the centerpiece of American life, dismantling the administrative state, defending the nation's sovereignty and borders, and securing God-given individual rights to live freely. In the mandate's foreword, Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts writes, "The long march of cultural Marxism through our institutions has come to pass. The federal government is a behemoth, weaponized against American citizens and conservative values, with freedom and liberty under siege as never before. Roberts interprets the phrase pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence as pursuit of blessedness. According to him, an individual must be free to live as his Creator ordained, to flourish. The Constitution of the United States, he argues, grants each of us the liberty to do not what we want, but what we ought. Key to a good life is found primarily in family, marriage, children, Thanksgiving dinners and the like, he writes, and, above all, in religious devotion and spirituality. Roberts complains that the United States in 2024 is a place where inflation is ravaging family budgets, drug overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. In a public statement, Roberts expressed concern over rampant crime in the United States. Project 2025's director is Paul Dance, who served as Chief of Staff at the Office of Personnel Management during the Trump administration. Spencer Cretian, a former special assistant to Trump, serves as Associate Director. Dance, also an editor of the project's guiding document, has said that Project 2025 is built on 4 pillars. The 30-chapter, 920-page book Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise, which presents a consensus view of how major federal agencies must be governed. A personnel database to be collated and shared with the President-elect's team, open to the public for submissions. An online educational system called the Presidential Administration Academy, and a playbook designed for forming agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon the President's utterance of "So help me God." While Project 2025 cannot, by law, explicitly promote him, Trump's campaign rhetoric has reflected its broad themes. He has said that he would fire radical Marxist prosecutors that are destroying America, totally obliterate the deep state, and appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family. To be admitted to the presidential personnel database, a recruit must respond to several prompts about their ideologies. One is name one living public policy figure whom you greatly admire and why. A recruit's social media accounts will be scrutinized. Hundreds of people would spend tens of millions of dollars to install as many as 54,000 Trump loyalists in the government. As project contributor Russell Vought told The Economist, how does someone who has an American first perspective, a populist perspective, govern credibly and effectively? Because they know the inner workings of government so well. Census citizenship question. The project seeks to revive a Trump administration effort to include in the decennial U.S. Census the question whether the person being counted is a U.S. citizen. The census is used to apportion congressional seats and the Electoral College. The Trump administration publicly argued it wanted the new question to prevent racial and language discrimination under the Voting Rights Act, an argument the U.S. Supreme Court rejected for the 2020 census. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says the congressional apportionment figures must include the whole number of persons in each state, not citizens. Christian nationalism. As the leader of the Center for Renewing America, Project 2025 contributor Russell Vought has spearheaded an effort to instill precepts of Christian nationalism into government and public life should Trump win a second term. In a 2021 opinion piece, Vought wrote that Christian nationalism recognizes America as a Christian nation and makes a commitment to an institutional separation between church and state, but not the separation of Christianity from its influence on government and society. According to Vought, Christians are under assault, and he sought to use his regular contacts with Trump to elevate Christian nationalism as a focal point should Trump be re-elected president. Vought has close ties with another former Trump administration official, Christian nationalist William Wolfe, who, in an online manifesto, seeks to implement a Bible-based system of government whereby Christ-ordained civil magistrates exercise authority over the American public. Former Christian nationalist Brad Onishi, who now studies religion and extremism, noted in February 2024 that Lance Wallnau of the New Apostolic Reformation, who has said Trump was anointed, had recently announced he was partnering with Charlie Kirk, a Project 2025 member. Onishi observed that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has direct ties to the New Apostolic Reformation. In his 2024 campaign speeches, Trump has echoed various aspects of Project 2025, including the promotion of Christian nationalism. A major concern of Project 2025 is what it calls woke propaganda in public schools. In response, it envisions a dramatic reduction of the federal government's role in education and the elevation of school choice and parents' rights. For Project 2025, education should be left to the states. To achieve that goal, it proposes eliminating the Department of Education and allowing states to opt out of federal programs or standards. Programs under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, would be administered instead by the Department of Health and Human Services, while the National Center for Education Statistics, NCES, would become part of the Census Bureau. The federal government, according to Project 2025, should be no more than a statistics-keeping organization when it comes to education. Federal enforcement of civil rights in schools would be significantly curtailed, and such responsibilities would be transferred to the Department of Justice, but the DOJ would be able to enforce the law only through litigation. The federal government would no longer investigate schools for signs of disparate impacts of disciplinary measures on the basis of race or ethnicity. Project 2025 explicitly rejects the pursuit of racial parity in school discipline indicators, such as detentions, suspensions, and expulsions, over student safety. A federal fund worth $18 billion for low-income students, Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, would be allowed to expire, and those responsibilities would devolve to the states. Public funds for education would be available as school vouchers with no strings attached, even for parents sending their children to private or religious schools. Free school meals and the Head Start program would be eliminated. For the project's backers, education is a private rather than a public good. Project 2025 also criticizes any programs to forgive student loans. Project 2025 encourages the future president to ensure that any research conducted with taxpayer dollars serves the national interest in a concrete way in line with conservative principles. 686 For example, research in climatology should receive considerably less funding in line with Project 2025's views on climate change. Expansion of presidential powers. See also, unitary executive theory. The notion of independent federal agencies or federal employees who don't answer to the president violates the very foundation of our democratic republic, Heritage President Kevin Roberts argues. Project 2025 seeks to place the federal government's entire executive branch under direct presidential control, eliminating the independence of the DOJ, the FBI, the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and other agencies. The plan bases this agenda on a disputed maximalist interpretation of the unitary executive theory, arguing that Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution vests executive power solely in the president. Project 2025 proposes that all Department of State employees in leadership roles should be dismissed by the end of the 20th of January, 2025. It calls for installing senior State Department leaders in acting roles that do not require Senate confirmation. Kieron Skinner, who wrote the State Department chapter of Project 2025, ran the department's Office of Policy Planning for less than a year during the Trump administration, before she was forced out of the department. She considers most State Department employees too left-wing and wants them replaced by those more loyal to a conservative president. When asked by Peter Bergeron in June 2024 if she could name a time when State Department employees obstructed Trump policy, she said she could not. If Project 2025 were implemented, congressional approval would not be required for the sale of military equipment and ammunition to a foreign nation, unless unanimous congressional support is guaranteed. Trump, the presumptive 2024 Republican presidential nominee, said in 2019 that Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution grants him the right to do whatever as president, a common claim among supporters of the unitary executive theory. Similarly, in 2018, Trump claimed he could fire special counsel Robert Mueller. Trump is not the first president to consider policies related to unitary executive theory. The idea has seen a resurgence and popularization within the Republican Party since the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001. In November 2023, The Washington Post reported that deploying the military for domestic law and immigration enforcement under the Insurrection Act of 1807 would be an immediate priority for a second Trump administration. That aspect of the plan was being led by Jeffrey Clark, a contributor to the project and former official in Trump's Department of Justice. Clark is a senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America, a Project 2025 partner. The plan reportedly includes directing the DOJ to pursue those Trump considers disloyal or political adversaries. For his alleged acts while working at the DOJ during the end of Trump's term, Clark has become a Trump co-defendant in the Georgia election racketeering prosecution and an unnamed co-conspirator in the federal prosecution of Trump for alleged election obstruction. After the Post story was published, a Heritage spokesman said Project 2025 contains no plans related to the Insurrection Act or targeting of political enemies. Media Matters reported that several Project 2025 partners praised the 2024 Supreme Court decision Trump v. United States, which grants broad immunity from prosecution for acts committed in the course of a president's official duties. Personnel change. See also, spoils system. Project 2025 proposes reclassifying tens of thousands of federal civil service workers as political appointees in order to replace them with Trump loyalists, who would be willing to bend or break protocol, or in some cases violate laws, to achieve his goals. It also established a personnel database shaped by Trump's ideology. The project uses a questionnaire to screen potential recruits for their adherence to the project's agenda. Throughout his presidency, Trump was accused of removing people he considered disloyal regardless of their ideological conviction, such as former Attorney General William Barr. In the last year of Trump's presidency, White House Presidential Personnel Office employees James Bacon and John McEntee developed a questionnaire to test potential government employees' commitment to Trumpism. Bacon and McEntee joined the project in May 2023. The project recommends that the future White House counsel be selected to be deeply committed to the future president's America First agenda. Project 2025 is aligned with Trump's plans to fire more government employees than allocated to the president using Schedule F, a job classification Trump established in an October 2020 executive order. Biden rescinded the classification in January 2021, but Trump has said he would restore it. The Heritage Foundation plans to have 20,000 personnel in its database by the end of 2024. Vought said that the project's goal to remove federal workers would be a wrecking ball for the administrative state. As of 2024, only about 4,000 government positions are deemed political appointments. That could change with each administration. Schedule F would jeopardize tens of thousands of professional federal civil servants, who have spent many years working under both Democratic and Republican administrations. As Donald Moynihan, a professor of public policy at Georgetown University, explains, while the apolitical and meritocratic selection of public servants is vital to administrative functioning, the Republican Party increasingly views them and public sector unions as threats or resources to be controlled. In an interview, Kevin Roberts said, "People will lose their jobs. Hopefully their lives are able to flourish in spite of that. Buildings will be shut down. Hopefully they can be repurposed for private industry." The project encourages Congress to require federal contractors to be 70% American citizens, ultimately raising the limit to 95%. By June 2024, the American Accountability Foundation, a conservative opposition research organization led by former aide to Republican Senators Tom Jones, was researching certain key high-ranking federal civil servants' backgrounds. Called Project Sovereignty 2025, the undertaking received a $100,000 grant from Heritage with the objective of posting names on a website of 100 people who might oppose Trump's agenda. Announcing the grant in May 2024, Heritage wrote that the research's purpose was to alert Congress, a conservative administration, and the American people to the presence of anti-American bad actors burrowed into the administrative state and ensure appropriate action is taken. Some found Project Sovereignty 2025 reminiscent of McCarthyism, when many Americans were persecuted and blacklisted as alleged communists. Foreign affairs. On the campaign trail, Trump has avoided any real specificity about foreign policy plans for a second term, but Clearon Skinner, who wrote Project 2025's State Department chapter, considers China a major threat, and is critical of any conciliatory move toward it. In its preface, Project 2025 states, for 30 years, America's political, economic, and cultural leaders embraced and enriched communist China and its genocidal Communist Party while hollowing out America's industrial base. Works of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, would be dramatically curtailed due to the Heritage Foundation's distaste for what it calls the agency's divisive political and cultural agenda that promotes abortion, climate extremism, gender radicalism, and interventions against perceived systemic racism. The word gender would be systematically purged from all USAID programs and documents. Project 2025 indicates specific United Nations agencies to be defunded and suggests the President be given more power to allocate U.S. foreign aid. 131. Such aid will not be allocated to help poorer countries address the impact of climate change, rather, it will be devoted to advancing fossil fuel companies' interests. Project 2025 favors neither interventionism nor isolationism. Instead, it emphasizes that all decisions related to foreign policy must prioritize national interests. We will break here for now and will return in the next with part 2. Thanks for watching and click the subscribe and notification bell as to not miss part 2. Also like, share and leave a comment.